So I know that there were some of you, I'm so sorry, lo siento muchísimo, who for whatever reason were not here last night. And I think we'll have a video.
Yes.
We better have a video.
It's videotaped.
Okay, so we started last night with a prayerful, joyful celebration. This is a tribute to, first of all, people who read their emails. and have the presence of mind, that's the second one, to remember to pack something when they were getting ready to come. So it is wonderful that this was built by the people of God, gathered as a people of God at God's table.
Amen.
Okay. You're going to let me talk all morning by myself?
Sure, if you want. You're doing a fine job.
Are you trying to tell me that, I just stuck and never stop?
No, you keep going. You've got very good points.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we really, Barbara Blumblett helped us along in setting the spiritual and theological foundations for our efforts to make sure that all can find good food, to make sure that we are helping to reveal God's table. First, we learned that Jesus ate a lot in the Gospel of Luke. And this is partially why he got into trouble.
Now, he also seemed to get into trouble because of who he ate with, inviting the poor and the lame, the sick, the outsiders. But inviting them, though, the point that I think was an interesting point for us to reflect upon as we continue to develop our foundation, that it wasn't to cure them, but it was to be in community with them, it was to be changed by them as they also help us to change the world.
Now, have you ever noticed that we all have the most reasonable excuses not to do what we know we should do? There are endless excuses that get in the way of bringing change. Do you remember Jesus saying things like, come follow me, and people saying, no, not this minute. I really have something else that is so important that I can't do what you're asking of me. So we all get excellent excuses. I certainly do. But social change and social transformation is not always reasonable, at least not as the world might understand it.
So for us, at the same time, we came out of last night knowing and believing and being reminded that change is still possible. That's why we're here. Change is still possible. The gospel is still unfolding in the lives that we continue to live and to share. And it's important for us to, I think, to not lose sight of that as we get sometimes the weightiness of this, and so that change is possible. But there's always a final meal.
And we all know that in Jesus' last meal, we were all invited to do this, and to eat with all people, and eating with all people so that all people may eat. It's a risky endeavor, my friends.
Now we're going to build upon this foundation this morning, and we're going to build upon this foundation in, I think, as people that are people of the book, people of the incarnation, of how do we see this incarnated in the world. We made this great table. Now we need to figure out how do we get more people to be at that table. And we're going to do some unlocking of that today. And to help us with this, and to help us continue that narrative of our story, we're very fortunate to have with us Br.Dave Andrews. Now you can read a lot about Br.Dave in the program, about his 40 years of experience in working for food security and sustainable development, including his 13 years as executive director of the National Catholic Rural Life Conference, and his current position as the senior representative for Food and Water Watch. But a few things that are not there that you're going to experience in Br.Dave sharing. First, he's a man of great passion and zeal for justice. Every experience I've ever had with Br.Dave, and I've had about 4 or 5, I have been moved, and it's like, wow, it's amazing that kind of passion that's brought to it in a very thoughtful and directed way. But this passion, though, comes, though, clearly by his great faith. He's a man of great faith. He's been a religious brother of the Holy Cross, or religious brother of the Congregation of Holy Cross. Got to get those religious congregations right. It's that little Catholic thing we have with each other. So it's the Congregation of Holy Cross, not the Holy Cross. It's Holy Cross. So, but that passion of that community, that faith is what drives that zeal. And I think that's important for us to realize that not only will he bring us great insights with policy and great insights to understanding how the food system works, but he does that as a fellow traveler, a fellow pilgrim in this Christian tradition with us, trying to bring about this change we all seek. So without further ado, Brother Dave.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for that bright light. And also, I did notice that when you look at the screens, I gained 20 pounds. I'm reminded of the book by Raj Patel, Stuffed and Starved. But it is great to be here. I was just in Rome. I was in Rome for 2 days of meetings as a member of the Finance Committee for the Civil Society Mechanism for the World Committee on Food Security. And what we did over those 2 days, April 2nd and 3rd, is we looked at the finances, the funding that's available to us by governments and by other donors like Oxfam, and looked at proposals from Asia, Africa, Latin America, and North America to see how we can fund local and regional meetings throughout the world like this, looking at food issues in those localities: Central Africa, East Africa, Malaysia, Philippines. So we did that over 2 days, developed the funding in response to proposals on how local groups, pastoralists, fisher folk, farmers, forest folk, how they can meet together to strategize about how to make our food system more just, more in line with a human right to food. So I was there April 2nd and 3rd. Since I was going over a little bit early for the 31st of March, I was at St. Peter's with Pope Pancho. And he, true to his name, rode around on that new Pope-mobile that doesn't have a top and sides, and got out and greeted people and kissed babies and welcomed the lame and the poor. Good example for us, a good way for me to spend Easter before I went to meet for 2 days to talk about how we can fund these projects for people to meet like this. And then I came home on Thursday, and today is what day? Friday, Saturday. I'm still on their time zone, so at 2 a.m. this morning, I was awake and ready to go. Well, we're talking about a place at God's table, food policy for a hungry world, and looking at the question of who's missing. I was very fortunate in 2005 to be a participant in an effort called the Sacred Foods Project. The Sacred Foods Project from 2005 to 2008 brought together, under the sponsorship of ALEF, the Alliance for Jewish Renewal, and worked in partnership with Faith in Place in Chicago, the Food Alliance, the Islamic Society of North America, the National Catholic Pro-Life Conference, the National Council of Churches, the Presbyterian Church USA, the Shalom Center, as well as other faith-based groups. And what we did over those several years was looked at the Abrahamic tradition to tease out what we had in common in terms of food systems work, in terms of a food system agenda. What we agreed to were 8 principles. You can find them on the web for Sacred Foods Project. But what I want to do is use those 8 principles from the Abrahamic tradition to situate our condition today relative to the answer of the question, who's at the table and who's missing. We did agree that there are many relationships in the web of life, plants and animals, human beings, water, air, all interwoven and all needed to be seen as interdependent. Since we agreed with that foundation, we agreed as well that the issue of conservation, of the protection of the fragility of this web, is very important. And so when you look at your asks for the Farm Bill, I hope you include conservation as an element of your asking. Food production is one of the more significant forces in the natural world. It affects the delicate balance of plants and animals, of human beings, air and land and water. We are in an interdependent world, and the social ecology and natural ecology need to be seen together as one, not as in silos or as separate realities. Especially in our world, where we recognize that 1/4 of the world's lands are suffering from deforestation and are the leading cause of deforestation and the loss of natural land is human activity. We need to maintain a balance for the future, we human beings. We must choose to produce our food in ways that protect the web of life, preserve this living space that other life forms require and need. So the first dimension that the Abrahamic traditions identified in the Sacred Food Project is that we live in this web that's fragile, that needs protection, that needs our concern and our care. The second dimension of the Abrahamic tradition is the humane treatment of animals. All of our traditions agree that animals must be treated humanely, their suffering minimized, and their care and concern be something that we are very conscious of. As Barbara said yesterday, coming from Iowa, I lived in Iowa for 13 years. And increasingly we moved to a concentration of land, of food production and of land. So that for 2 years, I was a member of the Pew Commission on Industrial Farm Animal Production and traveled throughout the United States looking at poultry operations, looking at cattle production, looking at pigs, looking at cows, and seeing them stuffed into small spaces, forced to live on top of each other in absolutely inhumane conditions. And in order for them to survive in those conditions, they required treatment with antibiotics. The antibiotics kept them alive, but also caused them to grow faster. We have in our treatment of livestock, of food animals in this country and increasingly around the world, a totally inhumane way of treating animals. And it's a way of treating animals that is scandalous. So scandalous that some of our states are saying that you cannot take photos of the way they're treated. And 19 states have food defamation laws on their books that say that you can't criticize the food that comes from those kinds of animals. 19 states. That's why Oprah Winfrey went to court, because she said, who would eat that stuff? She defamed the food. And for that, she had to go to court. So we have a terrible system. And I'm happy to tell you that I belong to the Faith Advisory Committee of the Humane Society of North America, of the United States. As someone who has a passion for livestock, for animals and the way they're treated, I recognize that we have to work to change the way we do animal production in this country and around the world. It's a total scandal. And you can applaud. And increasingly, in the way we treat animals, we're turning to science. And we're on the verge in this country of approving for food genetically engineered salmon, which now contain some genetic stuff from eels in order that they can grow twice as fast and they're twice as large. They're being spawned in Canada and being produced in Panama and being shipped to this country for food. Food and Water Watch has asked food companies like Walmart not to put them on their shelves. And when they do put food on their shelves that has been genetically engineered, we're asking that it be labeled so at least our customers recognize that they have the right to know how their food is being developed. We have an antitrust situation in this country around livestock production. Only a few companies control the way our livestock are produced. Cargill, Conagra, Tyson Foods, Land O'Lakes, a so-called co-op. These are the companies that produce our livestock, our meat. And it's a scandal the way that they have been concentrated in form and in shape. Now, over the years, the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Justice have combined their forces in a historic alignment to challenge the antitrust implications using the 90-year-old Packers and Stockyard administration that is the part of USDA that handles antitrust. They had 5 workshops around the United States looking at the concentration implications and the impact on our eaters of such concentration of production. They had these meetings all over the country. The Attorney General and the Secretary of Agriculture showed up at each of the meetings. And in Alabama, Christine Varney, who was handling the Packers and Stockyard work for the Attorney General, she said to a poultry producer, if you're worried about what will happen to you from the contractor with whom you have a contract, here's my business card. You let me know if you're being threatened. This was the attitude in the early days of the Obama administration. Unfortunately, that effort died totally. Dudley Butler, the head of the Packers and Stockyard administration, resigned. Christine Varney resigned. John Farrell resigned. Anybody in any position of leadership in the Obama administration, Justice Department, and in the USDA, they've all gone home. That card that Christine Varney handed to a poultry grower who was concerned about his livelihood is useless because no one has it anymore. The forces of wealth and corruption have won. And now, at the United States Department of Agriculture, one of the companies that was under scrutiny on seeds, namely Monsanto, has made it to the White House. They had recently a meeting with the Department of Agriculture in the White House. And recently, the Supreme Court, reviewing a case taken by a farmer against Monsanto, is not going anyplace to deal with justice for Monsanto. The Supreme Court is leaning towards giving Monsanto its head and its desires. So that we are in a challenging time when it comes to antitrust, when it comes to livestock production, when it comes to the concentration of food in the hands of a few. The third dimension of the Sacred Foods Project has to do with protecting the integrity and diversity of the ways in which we produce food, respecting the integrity and diversity of the world's plants and animals, as well as taking active steps to prevent the extinction of animal species and plant species. So this is something else that we have in common in the faith tradition, but also something that's under threat. Our work is not finished. It's only beginning. We need to have a climate-friendly farm bill. One that maintains and encourages the diversity of species, not their extension. And the fourth dimension of the sacred foods tradition is that no one should go hungry. All of our traditions share a strong commitment that no one should go hungry at the end of the day. And this applies especially to the poor in times of famine. As Congressman James McGovern says in the film A Place at the Table, we all have a right to food. Food as a human right was developed in the 40s by the Roosevelt administration. Why have we been shy about asserting it? Each local community and the worldwide human community acting in concert share the responsibility for ending hunger and famine. Our traditions encourage this. We need to have in the United States a zero hunger campaign. We need to have one around the world. Zero hunger, not just reducing it by half in 2015, but doing away with it totally at every level. I attended a meeting recently in Philadelphia called Food for the Cities. And many of our cities and our rural areas in this country have embarked upon such a project. We need to encourage it. We need to have a zero hunger approach and recognize the human right to food. 50 million hungry people in this country, 1 billion around the world, have a right to food. We should recognize and endorse that right and not be concerned about the implications of the right to food in terms of our domestic political life. We have not recognized the human rights approach as regards to social and cultural and economic rights in this country. But those rights have been recognized around the world for 60 years. It's become part of the cultural component of a global understanding. And implicitly then, to my mind, it becomes part of our culture and becomes part of our way of life. At the National Catholic Rural Life Conference, there is a campaign. It's called Eating is a Moral Act. They have a set of cards. You can find their table and see their cards, expressing this view that eating is a moral act. One of them has a farmer's hands, and they're pressed together palm to palm, held at waist level. You don't see the farmer's face, only the hands. And wrapped around his gloved hands are strands of twisted barbed wire, like a rope, binding them like those of a prisoner or a slave. This is a campaign that's directed toward eaters. It's a informational campaign meant to stimulate thinking about issues of justice in the production of our food and the people who labor to produce it. Eating is a moral act. It attempts to open our eyes to see what we would otherwise ignore, to take note of the deficiencies of justice in the midst of mounting riches for the few. to take note of the hard work of farming, the dangerous work of fishing, the tedious work of processing, the poorly supported work of waiting and washing and serving, all those raw and unsettled realities not reflected in the soft glow of the candlelight in our fine restaurants. Human realities blanched pale in the glaring convenience of fast food, which, like tobacco, is dangerous for our consumption. Economic oligopolies, glossed over by plastic packaging, by the handful of companies who control our eating at bargain prices and bargain basement wages. Look, take a good hard look at what we are overlooking. That's the cry of all prophetic voices. Throughout the history of faith, to see what would otherwise be ignored, though it's difficult to admit, we all have this tendency to overlook essential elements of justice. Whether it's the food we eat or the clothes we wear or the services we use, we all have a tendency to take our comforts for granted. But on the other side of this otherwise innocuous tendency comes the surprise reaction when we're confronted with words warning us about the long-term results of our lack of attention. It's our habit, a habit that leads to sin, the sin of overlooking the poor wages paid, the pollution made, and the plans laid by the rich and those for whom the buck never stops. Here in the United States and around the globe, a few huge companies control much of the food system, and the public policies and politicians, they've defeated the Obama administration's effort to enforce antitrust activity. They have forced Lisa Jackson out of the Environmental Protection Agency. And now, we've learned recently that Kathleen Merrigan is leaving the USDA. Kathleen Merrigan, the number 2 person at USDA, one of the 100 most powerful women in the world according to Time magazine, the winner of the James Beard Award for helping us have a sustainable food system, the founder of Know Your Farmer, Know Your Food, of the Food Hub approach that targets support for small and medium-sized farmers. The reporters, including Jerry Hagstrom, have commented on Kathleen Merrigan's departure. They said, you'll note that it says she's leaving. It doesn't clarify whether she's quitting or has been fired. There is, in Jerry Hagstrom's reporting, a hermeneutic of suspicion. Something's rotten in this house. And a week before she announced her departure, I had an email from LinkedIn saying, "Can I keep in touch with you?" from Kathleen Merrigan. I got wondering what was going on. I went to Michelle Obama's conference on obesity. Kathleen was to do a presentation. She was not there. So I'm thinking, along with Jerry Hagstrom, that the forces of corruption are winning, and the forces of sustainability are losing. It at least appears to me that the revolving door of men and women going from corporations to the Department of Agriculture and back again continues under the current administration. And I'm not surprised, are we surprised, that the regulations support the big and harm the small and medium-sized farmers and ranchers? Are we surprised that government fails to enforce the laws that are on the books? Should we be amazed that the regulations of the WTO are written by and for large food companies? Most of the world's farmers are small farmers. Most of those are women, over 1 billion of them. And these facts are part of the global calculus for food sovereignty and sustainability that's ignored by the powers that be. We need to face this honestly and deal with it in our trips to Capitol Hill. Oh, you say it's a global economy. That's what our Davos Economic Forum participants tell us. Free markets benefit everyone. And their automatic ritual suggests that we ignore disturbing reports of the 800 million who go hungry every day around the world and pass over such facts that since the passage of NAFTA, the working poor of Mexico has climbed from 40% to 60% of the population. Here's another such chant that we are supposed to be comforted by. The low wages of the maquiladoras simply reflect the lower standard of living in that country, a comforting verse perhaps. But it numbs the gnawing fact that the average wage of $5 a day in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, must buy food that costs the same as across the river in El Paso. We ignore many things at home as well. The growing poverty of rural America, the 50 million on SNAP, the demise of over 300,000 family farms in the last 20 years, and the fact that our Supreme Court, 5 Catholics support the greed of Ayn Rand rather than the compassion of Jesus in their ruling on People United. Take a look at what you'd rather ignore, but it's so distressing to be reminded of this. It's so frustrating to be aware of injustice and not be able to do anything about it. Indeed, we know that injustice exists and will always exist. But eating is a moral act, and sometimes a religious act, and the gratitude for holy food and the salvation it brings is fully expressed only when we remember that unleavened bread was first eaten by slaves on the run. And the cup of some drink is a cup of suffering. And just as I believe that bread and wine can be transformed, so we can be transformed into a people of compassion who see what others overlook, people who begin to trace the vague outlines of a prophetic vision of justice and peace. We can be the artisans of a new humanity and defenders of nature. We can recognize that eating is a moral act, indeed a spiritual act, and a grand table can be set, a table that reflects a diverse landscape where food is the common thread of unity, where the table includes those now missing, where bankers sit next to farmers. Border guards converse with the undocumented, and ranchers share toasts with environmentalists. A table that celebrates sustainability and lives out a vision rooted in a spirituality where work gloves lie next to linen napkins, where hands are scrubbed and feet are washed, where thirsts are quenched and hunger satisfied, and there's no hint of injustice, no whisper of enslavement, no sign of barbed wire anywhere. Our tables need to include those who have been excluded. Our talk needs to include our farmers and our ranchers, needs to include our food workers, needs to include the mothers who labor to give their children sustenance. Dimension 5 of the Sacred Foods Project says that we need to be fair towards the empowerment and work towards the empowerment of workers. This theme will be taken up by Michael Livingston. But our traditions agree that workers must be treated fairly, justly, and humanely. 1 out of every 6 people works to provide the food we eat, in the fields and in food transport, in restaurants and in food preparation, in food stores. We affirm their right to decent incomes, working conditions, and to organize themselves. Dimension 6, responsible and ethical forms of business. Not something that we find very often. All our traditions require that we act honestly, fairly, to the benefit of each other, and in accordance with the ethical teachings of our faith traditions when dealing with customers, employees, partners in the communities in which we conduct business. These relationships must be accessible to public scrutiny and accountability. We have to avoid giving allegiance to campaigns of blue washing and greenwashing, including such activities sometimes carried out by non-governmental organizations who align themselves, unfortunately, with activities of unscrupulous business enterprises. Conserve more, produce more. That's sustainable agriculture. That's the lie that Monsanto tells. The specifics of how we conduct responsible and ethical business relationships, as well as the meaning and implications of accountability to the public, may be reflected in the way we interact. But we have to recognize that fairness and accountability have to be part of our advocacy. Dimension 7 of the Sacred Foods Project. Food is an aspect of spirituality. All of our traditions affirm that food is an element in spiritual celebration and experience. Whenever we eat, we consciously affirm that eating is a sacred spiritual practice which celebrates the delicate interplay of plants, animals, and people, land, air, and water that makes this possible. And so we commit ourselves to maintaining this creation. And we do this at various times and various seasons. Easter, Passover, EAD. What is spirituality? Spirituality for sustainability is a steepening, like soaking tea leaves. It's a steepening of the mind and heart, body and soul. We are the leaves, the body is immersed in a broth of mystery. Spirituality is a way of living. It's an attitude, a motivation, a feeling practiced, and a practice feeling. Spirituality shows itself in the seasoning which accompanies one's way of being. Like tea, one can be steeped. It's the steepening which gives character to one's spirituality. How are you steeped? Are you steeped into some tradition, a way of life and being that has informed your thoughts, your words, your choices, and your actions? How have you steeped yourself? Lightly or thoroughly? Spirituality is absolutely necessary in our being. Dimension 8, reflection on our actions and our impact. We need to continuously evaluate our behavior, our action and interaction. And we have times in our traditions, the Sabbath, Ramadan, Lent, as well as other holidays, when we refrain from our daily work and reflect on our roles in the web of life. Meaningful observance of these occasions can be expanded to include reflection and assessment of the impact of human activity on the integrity of the web of life and in the different ways our traditions shape our being. All of us have some kind of approach that reflects the precautionary principle. Hannah Arendt once talked about the banality of evil. We get used to violence and accept it as part of our daily life. The drone-driven mentality. Terminator seeds. Technological methods of breeding and producing animals, giving us, in some regions of our country, fecal floods. This is the brave new world the government has given to us. At the USDA on April 29th, there will be an open meeting on the G8's approach to food production. I encourage you to look at USDA's website and go to that meeting. I want to conclude with a little bit of poetry and a little bit of philosophy. In 1980, Alistair MacIntyre wrote After Virtue. In that book, he asserted that the barbarians had been ruling us for a long time. We have the philosophers of the soil and earth like Wendell Berry and Aldo Leopold and Judy Wick and Nicolette Hahn Nyman and Kathleen Merrigan and others who in MacIntyre's book are identified as being new St. Benedicts, taking us beyond the current dark age of corporate control. MacIntyre says a crucial turning point in the decline of the Roman Empire occurred when men and women of goodwill turned aside from the task of shoring up the Roman Imperium and ceased to identify the continuation of civility and moral community with the maintenance of that imperium. What they set themselves up to achieve instead was the construction of new forms of community within which the moral life could be sustained so that both morality and civility might survive the coming ages of barbarism and darkness. That's what the food sovereignty movement is all about. The table of the Lord is one at which all have a place. And we have reached that turning point. What matters at this stage is the construction of local forms of community within which civility and the intellectual and moral life can be sustained through the new dark ages which are already upon us. we are waiting not for a Godot, but for another, doubtless very different Saint Benedict. Think to yourself, who are the persons leading this effort in every community? They're here. You are among them. Their books are being spoken about. My work at FAO is to amplify the voices of peasants, fisherfolk, forest people, pastoralists, who have solutions to global hunger, who deserve a place at the table, who worry about climate change and the financialization of nature and the plundering of earth. And I can turn to no one better than the woman with poetic vision, Denise Levertov, who says that we've not go down to the sea quite yet. There is a possibility of hope in a new vision. Her poem, Beginners, dedicated to the memory of Karen Silkwood and Elliot Gralla, says the following: from too much love of living, hope and desire set free, even the weariest river winds somewhere to the sea. But we have only begun to love earth. We have only begun to imagine the fullness of life. How can we tire of hope? So much is in the bud. How can desire fail? We have only begun to imagine justice and mercy. Only begun to envision how it might be to live as siblings with beast and flower, not as oppressors. Surely our river cannot be hastening into the sea of non-being. Surely it cannot drag in the silt all that is innocent. Not yet. Not yet. There is too much broken that needs to be mended. Too much hurt we have done to each other that cannot yet be forgiven. We have only begun to know the power that is in us. If we would join our solitudes in the communion of struggle, so much is unfolding that must complete its gesture. So much is in the bud. Recovery and resilience is possible in this new dark age. And this little light of mine is shining with those of many others in these days of ecumenical advocacy days, articulating the globalization of solidarity and the contours of the 1,000 tasks yet to be accomplished. Let us join together in the work of justice and peace, in the struggle for compassion. I trust that we will do this. God bless you and thank you. Now, I've said we have time for a question or two.
Why don't we, the other speaker first?
Okay, great. Michael.
I'm wondering if we could just take a minute to let this amazing presentation sink in quietly. Steep, steep, thank you. Let it steep for a minute. Thank you, God, for people of courage who are not afraid to speak truth. I could have introduced our next speaker. It might have made it easier to just for the flow, but I couldn't pass up the opportunity to let Michael just sit there and wonder what on earth is he going to say about me. And the truth is that I have a lot to say, and it's all good. Michael Livingston is the National Public Policy Director of Interfaith Workers Justice. Yeah. And Michael has quite a resume of justice making. Michael is a Presbyterian minister who fasted for 6 days in solidarity with the farm workers with the Coalition of Immokalee Workers in Lakeland. Man of faith, man of faith. I seem to remember that he just recently got busted at the Capitol and with the heads of communion of the heads of our offices in Washington who did civil disobedience. You know, like kneel down and pray in the rotunda. That is really criminal. Michael was president of the National Council of Churches in 2006, 2007. And he has just influenced us in the community of Washington, D.C. with his quiet wisdom, his gentle presence. Michael is a person of kindness, wisdom, gentleness, and a wonderful brother in Christ. And I'm just going to stop because I could go on, and I think it'd be better off if you get to meet Michael Livingston.
In my experience, you don't want to follow the firebrand who excites passions and speaks with power and volume. But I tell you, I am just so humbled by what we've just heard. And isn't it wonderful to see ordinary-looking people say these profound and prophetic things that point us in the direction we need to go? And did you notice, like I did, by the way, that the very last words of Brother Dave's presentation were, "Do this." And I could probably spend about 20 minutes, the whole time I'm supposed to be up here, just sort of reflecting on everything we've heard since last night and this morning. But I also framed last night's "do this" in a way that I'd never actually thought about that. I told that to Barbara last night. With the "what have we done" from the song that we sang this morning. What have we done? And do this. These are things I think we need to think about as deeply steeped in their truth and wisdom as we can. And I would be intimidated, Brother Dave, because you spent a little time with the Pope. But I know Gerardo Reyes. So, Brother Gerardo, why don't you stand and let people, yeah. So, you want to talk about worker justice. The Coalition of Immokalee workers and leaders, and Gerardo is an exemplar of this without equal. It's just wonderful. I wanted to do every mile of the 200 miles the workers just walked 2 weeks ago, but I could only get there for the last 3 days. 11 miles into the 14 miles on Friday, my body just gave out. And these workers who picked tomatoes in Florida walked 2 weeks, 14 days, 200 miles. And I just want to say amen. Rebecca and Jory Ortiz live in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, with their 2 small children. Anybody from Rhode Island here? You know this town? They've been SNAP recipients, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly food stamps, since October of 2011, and they get $518 on the first day of every month, deposited electronically on their electronic benefit card, EBT card. By the end of the month, when their benefits are exhausted, Rebecca makes a dish that they name for the kids rice-a-roni. But she and Jory call it what it really is, rice-a-whatever. Laid off from low-paying jobs in 2010, they finally got part-time jobs this last year, making $8 and $9 an hour. For the past 3 years, it's been, do we buy milk for $3.80 nearby, or do we go across town where we can get it for $3.10? Do we pay $600 to the landlord, or $110 for the cell phone bill, or some part of the $840 they owed the electric company? Their combined monthly income is $1,700 a month. When their SNAP money runs out and the bank account is empty, they make the circuit of Woonsocket's emergency church pantries. St. Agatha's on Mondays, All Saints on Tuesdays, St. Charles on Thursdays. St. Charles, the pantry opens at 10 o'clock in the morning, but there's a furious line growing at 6 a.m. Fully 1/3 of all the people in Woonsocket are SNAP recipients. 1/3 of the whole town, just like Rebecca and Jory. This means that businesses in this hard-hit town also depend on government-funded through the Farm Bill's SNAP program. At one local store, half the customers are white, a quarter Hispanic, 15% African American, plus a dozen immigrant populations drawn to the town by the promise of cheap housing. They're all on food stamps, and they rush into this place on the first of the month when they all receive their benefits. Friends, this is equal opportunity poverty. The Farm Bill is the biggest anti-hunger program in the country. So I hope you did your homework last night as you were asked to do, as Russ asked you to do, and you read the ask. And if you didn't, then tonight read the background document and read the talking points so that Monday you can ask Congress, ask the representative you speak to enact a farm bill this year that alleviates hunger and malnutrition. Hyler Ayako's 7 grandchildren were dying of starvation and nutrition in his village in Ethiopia. Drought, war, U.S. agricultural policies, and international monetary injustice were slowly killing them. And ironically, the Farm Bill also provided aid through the Food for Peace program. One day, a bag of green peas with USAID stamped on them reached Ayako. The bag started in North Dakota and traveled 12,000 miles by rail and ship and truck with warehouse stops in Lake Charles, Louisiana, in Djibouti on the Gulf of Aden that serves as a port for food aid, and Nazareth, 2 hours south of Addis Ababa, before finally reaching his village of Shalaluka. The trip took more than 6 months. U.S. farming giants, you heard them named, trucking and shipping companies, all made millions of dollars from this gift of food and others like it. But Mr. Yayako's grandchildren were dead when the food arrived. Halar Ayako is a farmer. He could have been sent money by wire to grow the food his family needs to eat, to keep them alive. Food policies in Canada and the European Union buy food near where it is used. Our program serves domestic interest more than the world's needy. The Government Accountability Office says that the cost of administration, shipping, and logistics eat up 1/2 to 2/3 of the budget of the Food for Peace program. Getting the aid from vendor to village, from the U.S. farm to the family overseas who needs it, takes 4 to 6 months. What we have, in Walter Berry's words, is an absentee economy without limit in its greed, without mercy in its exploitation of land and people. The Farm Bill is on life support. It expired last September, and programs like the experimental local and regional procurement program need expansion, not the elimination they face. Congress should enact a farm bill that reforms international food aid by purchasing food in the areas where it is consumed, if we have any real hope of increasing global food security. Listen to 17-year-old Anna Alexandra talk about her experience in the Youth Farmer Training Program of Interfaith Shuttle in Raleigh, North Carolina. I have found a community that I actually belong in. I have learned an incredible wealth of knowledge about nourishing my body and the earth. There are things that YFTP has taught me I would never have learned and never imagined myself doing. I never thought I would call myself a food rights activist. I never thought I would call myself a farmer, but I can now, and I do so proudly. And YFTP is just the start. It will continue to ignite my devotion to working for a beautiful and just world. Interfaith Food Shuttle was awarded a Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program grant funded by a grant from the Farm Bill. The funding expires in 2014. It's only a small part of the creative new areas that are beginning to flourish, but are now threatened by eroding funding for the expired bill. Programs supporting women, young people, people of color, community food banks, community gardens, farmers markets, all stand to benefit from Congress enacting a bill. This is your message, Monday morning and afternoon, a bill that supports vibrant farms and strong communities. Now let's do something. I want you to do this for me. If you're able, stand up if you're a farmer. If you do farm work, if you're a farmer, stand up. If you're from a farming family, stand up. If you're involved in soil or water conservation, if you're a part of a community food program, stand up. If you have a fruit or vegetable garden in your home, stand up. We're getting there. Does your congregation have a food pantry, a Meals on Wheels program for seniors or shut-ins? I'm going to get the rest of you now. Do you eat food? Then the Farm Bill is about you. You can sit down. The Farm Bill affects every one of us. Every one of us. And it affects the God-created earth that is our home. Does anybody really believe anymore that the earth is the Lord's and all that is in it, the world, and those who live in it? Look what we've done to the earth. Br.Dave talked about this. Soil loss, soil degradation, chemical pollution, the loss of genetic and specific diversity, the extinction or threatened extinction of species, the depletion of aquifers, stream degradation, the loss of wilderness, strip mining, mountaintop renewal. And here's Walter Berry again with a question for all of us. How can modern Christianity have so solemnly folded its hands while so much of the work of God was and is being destroyed? Congress should enact, this is your message Monday, a farm bill that protects God's creation. So I'm 2.5 years in Washington, D.C. today, almost exactly today. And you give me more than 2 minutes, that's what I'm accustomed to at a press conference, to say something. So fair warning, you've created a monster. All the pent-up frustrations of a person of faith, one among many in the faith advocacy community in D.C., and a preacher no less, required to bow down to representatives serving in offices of the venerable institution that define this city. Just pretend we're in D.C. across the river here. And embody the history of our nation, the Senate and House chambers, and of course the White House. The faith community is asked to influence the process of governing. So we go to these meetings respectfully, with smiles and warmth. Mari told you how gentle I am. You're so sweet. And we make our case. We aim to please. We offer support, information, and a perspective they don't often hear. Certainly they don't hear it with any regularity. At our best, we tell stories of our people, God's people, that we trust will move them, these representatives, to act for justice out of compassion and love. But this is our world, and you know it. 30,000 deaths annually, school children shot down on sidewalks outside their homes and in the sanctuary of an elementary school. What's the death count since Sandy Hook? What's it up to now? Say it out loud. 3,000. And no serious congressional action on background checks or registration or assault weapons or multi-shot clips. We get first posturing and finally retreat by Democrats even under the withering attack of the gun lobby and the millions of dollars in campaign money it spends to get its way. 11 million hardworking people in this country, immigrants, not illegal aliens, not even undocumented. Everybody has some documents, and not others. I'm undocumented. You're undocumented. We're all undocumented. Let's get rid of this language. And these 11 million deserve a roadmap to citizenship that respects family unity and protects the rights of workers. And our legislators are still just talking. And we don't know what they're going to come out with. Public schools abandoned, especially in our urban centers. Teachers treated like lab specimens, poked and prodded. My wife is a public school teacher in Princeton, New Jersey. She gets evaluated now, just starting now, 3 times a year. Poked and prodded, evaluated our teachers as if they, and not the crushing poverty of the children they teach, were not the problem. The problem we refuse to face in school reform. We get these revolving cliffs, fiscal, sequestration, debt ceiling, lame ducks, all of them created by manufactured fear and used like a screwdriver to tighten the nuts and bolts of ignorance and insecurity in a wall built to keep every other out. Thank God the president has forcefully called for raising the minimum wage, and there is a bill in Congress to do just that. But there are growing millions of hard-working people making minimum wage or less, working full-time and still unable to feed themselves and their families, to set a table of abundance like this one. These conditions and others you know about, and I could mention, these conditions are sinful and a stain on our nation, and God cannot be pleased with us. Now, I wish I could have said that with King's voice, silenced 45 years ago, or even J. Herbert Nelson's voice. So I'm going to say it again just to be sure. You got it. Twice soft equals once. Say it loud. These conditions are sinful and a stain on our nation, and God cannot be pleased with us. If you are fortunate, you were not watching the Louisville Duke game in the NCAA basketball tournament that will end on Monday night in the annual March Madness ritual that means nothing set next to the political machinations of Congress that shape the fortunes of every person on the planet. I was watching that game, and I offer that as confession. When Kevin Neal jumped to try to block the shot of an opponent and landed awkwardly and with such impact that he broke his leg in 2 places. A compound fracture, the bone puncturing the skin. Only the reaction of his teammates and even the opposing players and coaches and spectators were visible as the action was filmed and shown in real time. His teammates were writhing on the floor, grief-stricken at what they had seen. The sequence was replayed from a different angle moments later, and it was arguably the single most gruesome sight ever filmed of a sporting event. I promise you will not see this film because it will never be shown again. At least it should never be shown again. In a close-up of the player in the minutes after he fell, clearly in agony, we can't hear him, but we can read his lips. Over and over again, Kevin says, "Win the game. Win the game. Win the game." The mere basketball game is at stake. Victory for his team, nothing else. He has suffered a horrific accident and is in excruciating pain, and what he thinks and says is, "Win the game." We call it an ask, what you're going to be doing on Monday. But I want to ask, why are we asking? Every year, 1 year after the next, we ask. We beg our government, our elected officials, to be decent, to do the right thing, to protect the most vulnerable people in the most modest ways. And every year, year after year after year after year, we go, people of faith, nonprofits of all kinds, and on all kinds of issues, pleading for justice and fairness, grace and mercy for the people of God. Even when we win, we don't get much, not nearly enough to offset the horrors of capitalism gone wild, gone global, feeding the insatiable hunger of corporations who are not the people the Constitution envisions. What we ought to be doing is turning over the tables in the sacred space of our national governmental cathedrals, those places so corrupted by legal yet profoundly unethical money-changing and special interest, some of them of a most pernicious nature. That's really bad. It could. We should be shouting with righteous indignation. God loves Rebecca and Jory and their 2 children. God loves Halar Ayako and loves still his 7 dead grandchildren. God loves every person on earth created in the very image of God. We have a sacred duty on Monday. And when we return to our homes, whether or not you go on visits, and I hope you do, I want you to remember who you are and for whom you speak. You speak for God and God's own people. Thus says the Lord. When you go in those congressional offices Monday, tell that legislative assistant you'll talk to. Tell them the faith version of what that injured player, Kevin Neal, kept saying. For heaven's sake, save the soul of our nation. Win the game. Conserve the beauty and the richness of the earth. Win the game. Care for the many and the one. Win the game. Win the game. Tell them you're speaking for God's people at home and abroad, in this nation and every nation. Tell them to pass a farm bill this year that alleviates hunger and malnutrition, supports vibrant farms and healthy communities, and protects God's creation and our home. Amen.
We're going to have, pardon me, a little choked up over that. We're going to have time for about 10 minutes of questions to both Brother Dave and to Michael. Because it's a very short period of time, keep your questions short, questions of clarification. There'll be other times to ask questions, so if you don't get your question answered this time, there'll be other times to talk about the ask and our ways of bringing our message to the Hill. We're going to have a couple of microphones stationed with carriers, 3 microphones. So just kind of, you can kind of move to the aisle if you have a question. They'll come to you. That'll facilitate the timing. And, okay. So whoever's got a question, comment. Okay. And direct who you want it to as well, please.
This question is for either of you. I am an American farmer. In the mail, I regularly receive Top Producer, Farm Journal, Progressive Farmer, and Southeast Farmer magazines. Basically, they're sent to me free of charge, so basically they're a form of propaganda that I receive regularly in the mail. These are sent to all American farmers, and this, in effect, controls the way we do farming. How would we be able to offset that kind of mindset, because it seems to be so pervasive in what's really controlling the way we do farming now?
Well, I suspect that those materials are being paid for by our taxpayers in a checkoff program that comes from the sale of every animal. And so what you need to do is to challenge the checkoff program and those who support it. National Cattlemen's Beef Association, for example. Right now, there's a lawsuit against the Department of Agriculture and the Secretary complaining that the checkoff funds have been misused. We already have some proof of the fact that the leaders of various organizations have, in terms of agriculture, have gone on expensive trips using that funding. And that's already illegal, but there's more that needs to be explored and explained. So you need to tell the USDA to monitor better the checkoff and how the funds are being used.
I have a question. Considering the stalemate that is currently in our government situation, what, in your perspective, because both of you have been dealing with this on a regular basis, is the chance that there will be a farm bill passed this year, considering the stalemate? And what other, I mean, going on Capitol Hill and lobbying is a great idea, but what other things can we do in our local towns to push this big issue?
Great question. At the moment, it really is EAD that is addressing the question of the Farm Bill. And other parts of the advocacy communities here in DC are all consumed with immigration. And of course, there are implications, and profound implications in the Farm Bill for that. But immigration and gun control. I mean, those are the things that are animating the communities here. Of course, the sequestration as well. So my point here is that it's EAD, it's this community that's thinking about the Farm Bill now, and it will likely be addressed toward the end of the year. It's always those lame duck sessions where big decisions like this get made. So it's important, it's really timely that with all the other things going on, you are here this weekend and on Monday talking to legislators, talking to representatives in their offices about the Farm Bill. But the trick then is translating this into local activity all around the country. And EAD, from one perspective, is about waking up the faith community and engaging people who simply don't normally do these kinds of things. And we heard it last night in what Barbara said, reflecting on some of David Beckman's comments. We just don't think about doing this kind of work. We'll feed the hungry and we'll start the food pantries, but we don't know our legislators by their first names. They don't cringe when they hear, oh, she's calling again. And they need to. So we need to be apostles of this gospel, you know, the gospel of engaged citizenry, of people of faith acting on their faith and demanding that the government be responsive to the vast array of programs that are in the Farm Bill, which affect every last one of us.
Over here.
Thank you for sharing the truth with us. It's often painful to hear the truth of reality and for us to face that. You are doing this work daily, and I'm wondering what keeps you going and what you can share with us that gives you hope so that we can take that away with us as well.
I'll just respond. I think I have resilience, and that comes from faith. I'm blessed with faith, and that gives me courage and hope. And so I keep on keeping on, just as you do.
I can't, I have to respond just a little bit. I mean, I get halfway through Brother Dave's presentation, I don't know if I was depressed or angry. I mean, it was telling us, maybe both, you know, how profoundly forces for change and conservation and nutrition and are being defeated in our government. But what gives me hope is really community. It's the Coalition of Immokalee Workers. It's the National Domestic Workers Alliance. It's the Restaurant Opportunity Center. There's incredible organizing going on in communities like this one. And we are, just as CIW keeps knocking those corporations off one after the other, Taco Bell, McDonald's, Whole Foods, what's that one I like? Trader Joe's. Yeah. This is inevitable as long as we remain engaged and keep our hands on the plow.
Last question right here. Left for this time. We'll get more later.
Okay, Brother Dave, you commented on the Zero Hunger program. In Leviticus, it talks about God commanding the Israelite farmers to leave part of their fields for the poor, to leave grapes on the vine for the poor, to leave olives on the trees. The poor were to eat the same very healthy diet that the farmers did, at least to have a chance at it. Can you comment on that in light of what you find in food pantries today? My cousin once went looking for vegetables for her food pantry, and all she could get from the food bank were cake mix boxes and fiber bars.
So I lived in New Orleans for 3 years, and I was in law school. And our congregation had a food bank. Now, in the early 70s, I had organized meetings in New York State with Jane Blewett of the Center of Concern, Harry Chapin of World Hunger Year, Rabbi Mark Tenenbaum. And we talked about gleaning. In the early days, the gleaning program was a real program with real food being gleaned from the fields, just as you've described. But that became Second Harvest. And Second Harvest became Feeding America. And we went from real food to corporate cast-off food. So at the food bank in New Orleans, at Sacred Heart of Jesus Parish, we shopped every week at Second Harvest, paying pennies a pound for freezer-burned meats and granola bars with ants. And we ate what we purchased, so I put on 40 pounds. It wasn't healthy. What we should have done is used the grounds that we had for community gardens. And that is increasingly what's happening, is that more people are putting in their parishes and in their food banks. So I know, for example, in Tucson, Arizona, one of the housing developments put up 12 acres for food production, which is then utilized in the Tucson food bank. More food banks are using fresh, healthy, local, and regional foods as a supplement to the food that comes from corporate cast-off food. So we're doing a little bit better to meet the criteria that you have articulated.